Park, Chicago. Here for Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's an NFL insider, the host of Broncos Country Tonight on KOA 850 in Denver. Please welcome Benjamin Allbright to the program. Benjamin, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Hey, good to be back, John. How you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for being here. What do you make of the Bears-Lions game first off?
Well, I think it's a shame they won. I mean, it's the Lions. You got to get a W off of that, right? The Lions don't have much defense. That's why they call them the Detroit Lions at this point. But I thought Chicago's still got some things they've got to work on. The last couple of games after they retooled the offense, they started utilizing the legs of Justin Fields, something they should have been doing all along. But they started using the legs of Justin Fields. The offense is starting to take off a little bit. They still got some deficiencies in the pass game, though, and that's going to be a problem until they shore up the line, the receivers, and they get Justin Fields sped up as far as processing the game. But there's some promising signs there. If you go back and you look last year at what the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts, a lot of it was with his legs there. Now, ultimately they got to the playoffs. They figured out he couldn't throw, and they took it away from him over the offseason. They got the passing component installed, and you see what the Eagles became this year. So there's hope there, for Justin Fields. And as the Bears continue this evaluation process of whether he's the franchise guy or not, I think they're leaning in the direction that he is at this point. I know fans don't like to hear me say that in that context, but it's the truth. I mean, I'd rather just tell you hard truths and easy lies. I think that there's optimism. There's certainly things to look at Justin Fields and say, okay, there's areas here where we can improve, and there's areas where he has improved, and you can take solace in that. But I think overall, this 4-game stretch, it's been certainly historic with his legs, but we need to see the throwing. When it comes down to, I need him to throw me a touchdown to win me a game, show me that. And once he's got that, then we've got our guy.
What's he still need to improve on specifically? Like when you watch him play, is there something you could point out and say this needs to get better?
Well, it's kind of tough because you've got some receivers that drop a football. You got an offensive line that's not all that great. So it's kind of tough to isolate that in a vacuum. But I will say his eyes are still a little slow. He's slow going through progressions. He's slow understanding what it is the defense is doing. That was the knock on him coming into the league. And again, I know fans don't want to hear that, but it is the truth. Has he got better about that since he's been in the league? Sure. And that comes with time and with reps and everything else. Anytime that you get more reps on something, you get better, you get smoother, you get faster at it. So there's certainly some positivity to take away from that, but he's not where he needs to be yet. And that's just a fact. Will he get there? I don't know.
Are you sold on his ability at this point to really be the franchise guy for the Bears?
I wouldn't bet my job on it. No. And that's the way I try to look at it. Can he get there? I absolutely believe he can get there. Do I believe that he will get there? That's the $1 million question, or in this case, multi-million-dollar question. If you're, Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poole, I think they're going to bet on him for next year. And see if he takes that Jalen Hurts-like leap. And if he does, then they look like geniuses. If he doesn't, then they look smart for having taken the extra year and done that, although they'll get backlash from certain segments of the fan base for saying they sunk a year of Bears football into a guy that didn't get there. So the smart thing to do, I think, at this point, based on what he's done over the last 4 games, is give him another season and try to build around him in the offseason, because if you build around him and it doesn't work, well, then you've built around the quarterback position anyway, and you're going to plug and play probably another young guy in there anyway. So that's probably the smart thing to do when all's said and done. But I would not bet on him becoming the guy. I'm not going to bet against him. I'm just going to avoid that bet altogether at this point.
A lot of Bears fans have already said he is the guy. But what's your response to them who say he's already there? He's nothing that needs to be improved upon. He's the guy already.
Well, then I would say they don't know what they're talking about. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude, but, yeah, he's exciting and fun to watch, but so was RG3 for a year and a half, and it wasn't just the injuries that tanked him. It was the fact that he got figured out. I think that the Bears have changed the offense, and we're talking about 4 games. Give it another game or two. Let defenses kind of get enough tape on them to figure out what they're doing, and then when they counterpunch, see what the Bears come back with. And that's the game, is punch counterpunch. And if you see that, you see the defenses, kind of figure out how to contain him and all that kind of stuff, and then figure out if he can evolve beyond that. And that's why I always like to use the Jalen Hurts comparison, because he did. I didn't believe in Jalen Hurts, and he made me look like an idiot. Can we get the same thing out of Justin Fields? Maybe. I think a lot of people, because I live in Denver specifically, think that there's some kind of tie to the Broncos with all that. There isn't at all. That has nothing to do with any part of it. The Broncos were never drafting Justin Fields anyway. Like, that was never a thing. So, for me, I'm trying to evaluate this independently, and I wish people would stop dragging that portion of it into it. I think the thing to look at here is, does this guy have the tools? Yes. Now, can he put those tools to work? And we've started to see that over the last 4 games. Will we see that once defenses have figured out how to defend what they're doing right now? Will we see him take the next step beyond that and elevate the passing game to where it needs to be? That really is the big question, and I look forward to seeing that answered one way or another.
How similar would you say his trajectory is to Jalen Hurts? I mean, we see Hurts now obviously succeeding. The Eagles are doing great. Could you see something similar happen to Fields if things go right?
Well, I would say that their timeline is similar. I mean, what has happened to them is similar. You got two offensive coordinators that have similar backgrounds, I should say, that are working to try to maximize the traits of the guy that they have. With Hurts, the problems were a little bit different. It wasn't that the game was too fast for Jalen Hurts. It was that he just was an inaccurate passer. With Justin Fields, there's some processing stuff. You've got to speed him up. You can speed him up. He's got the arm strength. He's got the legs to buy himself time and all that. If you can speed him up, you might have something there, and that really is what it is. And that just comes with time. That just comes with doing something. It comes with practice. So, and that's the thing with a lot of quarterbacks. Either they get it or they don't. There are some guys out there that have all the tools in the world and never get there. But I think for Bears fans, they're probably excited because this is the toolsiest guy they've had that I can recollect ever. And I think that I think there's excitement because the baseline tools are there. The question is, in the end, does the player that he could be and the player that he is ever meet?
Benjamin Allbright here on Sports Talk Chicago. Benjamin, what's your take on the Bears' new regime at this point? Matt Eberflus is head coach and Ryan Poles now at GM.
I haven't liked a lot of the decisions Ryan Poles has made so far. I got to be honest with you. Now that's not to say that, he's got a clean house and he's got to, reestablish what it is that he's going to do. So, I to his credit and my looking at just the moves made so far, that's unfair to him. Matt Eberflus, I always liked as a coach. I've known him for a while. He's a good coach. Luke Getsy was a guy the Broncos had looked at. He was a potential hire down here. He's a smart guy. I like what Getsy finally did. I wish he'd have done a little sooner, but I sort of get why they waited a little bit too. They waited till the middle of the season because they thought if they banked enough wins doing it the other way, then they can change the offense mid-season and nobody has tape on it, and then they kind of ride that maybe into the playoffs or something, early on. So I sort of get what they were doing. There's a 4D chess component to it. But part of me just wishes for Fields development that we would have a clearer picture at this point than we do. We know what he can do with his legs. That's phenomenal. But with the rest of it, so I think they're pretty good. I think that Eberflus will eventually get guys that fit his system in there, and the defense will do a lot better because they've been letting the team down a little bit, over the last couple of weeks. It's not really been the offense like it was early.
How'd you feel about those trades the Bears made, too? They got rid of Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith, and a lot of people here in Chicago are wishing they could have stayed since the Bears are playing ball offensively. What'd you make of those moves?
I think that I probably wouldn't have made the Roquan move, but I understand why they did it. They kind of had to. They're at the point where he kind of forced his way out. With Quinn, I get it. That was one I got. That was kind of coming, and he doesn't really fit what it is that they want to do in the end. Anyway, you're kind of converting the defense and changing it over and turning it over into what Eberflus wants to do, which is going to be a little bit different. What was the other trade they made? Claypool. I like the Claypool trade on its merit. He's an athletic player. He's more athlete than receiver. He's a guy that needs to grow as well. And so, I think I like that if they can grow him. I don't, stripping away all the receivers that they had and then adding him mid-season felt a little weird, but I sort of get it in terms of what they want to do offensively. I think a lot of what they're doing this year is kind of writing things off and kind of trying to make a run maybe next year after. If you were looking at how NFL teams like to build, it's usually lose big, lose small, win big, right? That's the 4-year plan, right? Or crawl, walk, run. And I would say that they're in between the crawl and walk phase, and they're in the lose small, kind of win small. They hope to be in that phase, and they hope to be in that phase firmly next year in the win small phase. So, they've got enough time. They're going to get a full 3 years, so they don't have to win this year. But, as far as on its merits, adding a talented player, great trade. As far as what they did this year and not adding anybody when they had other opportunities and then adding him mid-season, a little head scratching.
How do they start to run? They're going to have $140+ million in cap space this offseason. You're expecting them to spend some money, right?
Yeah, and I expect it'll be up front, both sides of the ball. I expect it'll be offensive and defensive line. They'll go to the draft for some of the other stuff, but I expect the big money to be spent along the offensive and defensive line. And that's the smart thing to do at this point. You strip this thing down, you've kind of figured out who your core players are to build around. Now it's time to build the trenches and then build around those other players. And that's, in the modern NFL, that's the smart rebuild philosophy. So, good for them for doing that. It'd be interesting to see if they hit on that or not, because you look at the Colts and what they spent on the offensive line, it didn't work for them. So, you got to make sure that if you're spending that kind of money, that you're spending it in the right places and getting quality guys out of it and not just throwing money at a problem.
You think they could be a playoff team next year if they spend their money wisely and build up their roster based on what they already have, too?
Yeah, Fields takes the next step as a passer, absolutely. Because I think you're going to see in the next couple of weeks people figure out that ground game and how to contain it, and then they're going to force him to throw. And once they force him to throw, let's see where he's at. If he's able to take that next step as a passer, absolutely be a playoff team, especially in that division where you've really got kind of the Vikings and nothing else. The Packers have fallen off a cliff. I know they came back against Dallas, but you can run on Dallas. They knew that going in. The question is whether the Packers can sustain that, and the Lions just don't play defense as much as we. It's a feel good story. Probably not if you're a Bears fan, but it's a feel good story around the league to see the Lions, having a little bit of offense. But if you can't play defense, what good is an offense? And the Detroit's still a year or two away. So I think you could make the playoffs. The NFC as a whole is kind of weak. I mean, the East is kind of putting together great records, but the Giants aren't as good as their record is. The Eagles, Dallas, Washington, they'll cannibalize each other a little bit. And there's really not that many other teams. The West has taken a dive off a cliff, and the South is pathetic. So, I think if you're good enough with the expanded playoffs, I don't see why the Bears couldn't make the playoffs next year.
How do you explain the Green Bay Packers collapse? Just, I know off Bears topic, how do you explain that collapse?
Well, it's a combination of things. You stripped away a large portion of that offensive staff. Getsy, Hackett, Otten, those guys are all gone now. You've gotten rid of a lot of the receivers that Aaron Rodgers is familiar with and knows what to do with. It has the timing of the tempo down. The offensive line has had some injuries. I think it's a combination thing. I don't think it's any one thing, and I don't think Rodgers is washed per se. But he's gotten a year older, and you like I said, you stripped away an entire offensive staff you had to rebuild. Look at Frank Reich. Look what happened in Indy after Sirianni left and took that staff with him. The Colts weren't the same after that, and Frank Reich got fired trying to build a new staff and build an offensive line. So that kind of stuff. It's funny how that stuff happens. You've got a staff intact. Kyle Shanahan's kind of put a process together that allows him to keep bleeding assistants, but eventually, the well runs dry. And that's the thing. When you have success, everybody wants a piece of it, and that's what happens. Your staff gets poached.
You mentioned the Colts. Your take on Jeff Saturday with no experience winning his first NFL game.
I liked it for a couple of reasons. I liked it because, every guy that ever sat at home and played Madden now suddenly thinks he can coach in the NFL. I've got no experience. I could win. I liked it because, it's the Colts revenge game. Josh McDaniels quit on them. And so you kind of got a revenge thing there. So that's fun. It was just fun all the way around. Matt Ryan got back to starting and came back and had a good game. I just thought it was fun. And, it's the Raiders. Bleep the Raiders.
Is Josh McDaniels in trouble?
He would be if the Raiders weren't broke. I don't think they could afford to pay another coach. I think that's sort of the problem. The Raiders are broke, and I'm not sure they can afford to pay another coach. They're one of the most cash poor teams in the league. So, I think he would be gone at the end of this year if they could afford it. I'm not sure they can afford it, and that's sort of the problem. So, from what I understand, that locker room, the offense is kind of in revolt. He's already kind of sort of lost the locker room with all his extra work nonsense and not getting any wins. So, we'll see. I think he's on thin ice.
Did you see that coming? Because, he was the Broncos coach back in the day, too.
Yeah, he's a train wreck. He's terrible. He's not a good head coach. He's a great football mind, but he's not a head coach. And he doesn't have any positive reinforcement to what he does. He expects guys to work long hours, holidays, all this kind of stuff, beat themselves up, and never gives thanks to anybody. It's all about him and his genius and everything else. He never gives compliments out, never pats anybody on the back, never there, that kind of coach. And he's just not. And, he learned that from Bill Belichick. And Bill's got the cachet to get away with it. And also Bill had Tom Brady there that could cover all manner of sins. Derek Carr is a pretty good quarterback, but he's no Tom Brady. And that's sort of the problem. You don't have a defense. You're not going to be able to get away with that. And so in the end, I think, this was predictable. Josh McDaniels has always worked guys to the bone, and when you're not getting wins, they kind of give up on that.
Benjamin Allbright still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Benjamin, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, the Broncos. What do you make of their season right now, too?
It's a disappointment for sure. There were high expectations coming into this thing. The talk all offseason was this offense, Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson. I think everybody's prematurely writing Russell Wilson's obituary. I've seen him in practice. I saw him in practice in training camp. Russ ain't washed. It's a combination of this offense and the injuries he's got. And so I think next year, if and when they hire a new coaching staff, I think they'll do better at doing what Russ does best and kind of framing things up to where he does the best. This season, though, wild disappointment, especially you've got the number 1 defense in the NFL and the number 32 offense. That's a phenomenon that hasn't happened since the 1940s with the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've had it happen the opposite way. We've had the number 1 offense and the last defense, like the 2000 Rams. But we've never seen a phenomenon like that where you've had the worst offense in the league paired with the best defense. If this team could just score 18 points in every game, they'd be 8-1 right now. That's how bad the offense is and how good the defense is. And there's a lot to build on, but there's some serious hard feelings about the way the offense is underperforming right now.
You said if and when on the coaching staff, is Coach Hackett in the hot seat?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. And I would be shocked if he was back next year. It's just this offense is just in over its head, and he continues to give the same platitudes over and over about, we need to be accountable. Well, accountable to who? Because you're losing, and it doesn't appear like you're accountable. You came out of the bye week and had 2 weeks to prep for the Tennessee Titans, who aren't exactly the most three-dimensional team in the world, and put up 10 points. I understand their defense is all right, but, dude, you put up 10 points, 7 of which came on an audible from the quarterback and a busted coverage, and that was it. Like the rest of it, you got a field goal, run your offense, dude. You got to figure stuff out. And he had the opportunity to turn over play calling, wouldn't do it. And that was what saved. I hate to keep going back to the Eagles as an example, but that's what saved Nick Sirianni. Last year everybody told Nick Sirianni he looked like he was in over his head. They were making fun of him nationally. The Eagles were an embarrassment. They were like 3-6, and he turned play calling over to Shane Steichen, stepped back, and sure enough, they took off. And he had the opportunity to do that and didn't do it. And so now I think he's going down with the ship.
How do you explain this bad performance from Hackett? I mean, he's a good offensive mind, did well in Green Bay. Why hasn't it translated out in Denver?
Yeah, I think you just got different quarterbacks. You've got a different offense, different guys, different set. You've got a situation where you're not able to run what it is that you've wanted to run for a long time. You don't have the offensive line that's able to block for all these long developing plays that they have. And they want to throw the deep ball and cool. That's nice, but they don't have the offensive line to block for that. And so that's been a problem.
Benjamin, before we finish up today, last question. Why don't you like pumpkin spice Cheerios?
I don't like pumpkin spice anything. First of all, it's not pumpkin. Second of all, if I wanted nutmeg and cinnamon, I just get nutmeg and cinnamon. So pumpkin spice lattes, Cheerios, all of it. You can throw. The best way to enjoy a pumpkin spice latte is to take the lid off and then pour it directly into the sink and then throw the cup away and get a drink that a man would drink.
Love it. From Benjamin Allbright. Thank you so much. Always appreciate the time, and looking forward to reconnecting very soon. Best wishes over in Denver for sure.
Absolutely. Yes, take care.